Hey everyone, I'm Julia from Little World of Whimsy, and today I'm here to talk to you about the difference between straight knitting needles and circular ones. Let's start with the straight needles. So straight knitting needles are probably the most conventional needles that you might be familiar with. They're long and usually have a little cap on one end with a point at the other, and they are two needles that come separately. So straight needles can only be worked in turned rows. That means you can only work them back and forth. You can't work in circular rounds. And so you can only make things that are that you can go back and forth on, so like rectangular shapes. This means it's good for scarves, maybe like sweaters that are made out of rectangles. Those could work, or maybe little coasters or pot holders, just anything that's like rectangular in shape. And I'm going to show you why. So when you're knitting on straight needles, you can only knit one row at a time and you can only go back and forth. And so there's actually a right side, which is this side, and a wrong side if you're working in stockinette. So I'm gonna just knit back and forth once. So I'm just finishing my purl row, and as you can see, I've just added one row to my little rectangle over here. So now it's one row longer. And to continue extending this rectangle, I'm just going to switch my needles and then work back in knit stitches. And so because of that, I will only be able to make a rectangle because I'm just going to be adding rows every single time. So I've just finished my row of knit stitches, and you can see that my little rectangle has just gone a little bit longer. So one of the drawbacks of using straight needles when knitting is that because after each row you literally switch to which hand is holding your main project. The project is always sitting in one of your two hands, and so you can imagine as this piece of fabric over here gets much longer and heavier, all the strain is going to be in my left hand, which is holding the bulk of the project. And so it can cause a lot of strain, especially if this rectangle were even longer. This is a 13-inch needle. It could get longer and much bigger, and then you'd be holding that entire project all in your left hand, eventually transfer to your right hand. And so that could create a lot of wrist strain for some people. Now let's take a look at circular needles and see how they compare and what else they can do. So here are what my circular needles look like. As you can see, I've also knit a similar swatch right here. And this is because circular needles can both knit back and forth, like this, like you just saw me do on the straight needles, but they can also work in the round. So this means that they're versatile in that they can both knit rectangular shapes like those scarves I mentioned before, or like rectangular pot holders. They can also knit in the round for things like hats, sleeves, ear warmers, cowls, just anything you could think of. Sweaters that are knit top down. So this really increases the versatility of circular needles. And just I'm going to demonstrate really quick how to knit back and forth, because it might seem a little bit weird. So just like with the straight needles, when you will still switch to the needles every time you finish a row, but you will just have the work curve a little bit towards the right hand because the needles are shorter. So I'm just going to knit across like normal. Alright, so I'm almost done with my row of knit stitches, and as you can see, or maybe you can't see, that it's gotten just a little bit longer. What I'm going to do now is, just like with the straight needles, I'm going to switch my needles so that I'm holding the work in my left hand again. And then I can work purl stitches on the way back. So that way I'm still working in turned rows even though I'm using circular needles. And you can see the only difference is that it's not perfectly straight because I'm kind of holding it on the curved needles. So now I'm just going to work the purl stitches on the way back. Because you're working back and forth for the circular needles and also with the straight needles, you'll notice that when you follow patterns that I worked back and forth, they'll have a right side and a wrong side. So right now I'm working on the wrong side. But if you are knitting in the round, in continuous rounds, because you never switch hands, you never like switch the position so that you're working on the other side of the knit fabric, you will only be working on the right side. So that's another difference in why you'd want to work back and forth versus in continuous rounds. Awesome, so I've just finished the purl row, and as you can see, like I end up with the project in my right hand, and so to continue I just flip them over again and keep working. And the one benefit, another benefit of using circular needles is that, as you can see, the weight of the project is no longer only being carried in one hand. And actually, even if this were longer, it would mostly be carried in my lap or like on the table where I was working. And this is a huge benefit of working with circular needles because you won't experience too much, or you'll experience significantly less wrist strain from holding heavy projects like sweaters or even just like bigger scarves. Because you won't be carrying the entire weight of the project in one hand. It will literally just sit in the middle, like right here. And next I'm going to show you what it's like working in the round on circular needles. So when you're working in continuous rounds on circular needles, you will have stitches all around the needles and you will just never stop knitting. Like it says, continuous rounds, so you will knit continuously. And I've actually just finished, this is the tail, and so I actually finished the first round. And so you saw that right after I finished the first round, I did not turn my work, I didn't flip my needles or anything, I just continued knitting continuously. And unlike when working back and forth, you're always working on the quote-unquote right side. So you will never, so when you're reading patterns, it will not say right side and wrong side, it will just say knit this or purl that. Because when knitting continuously, you don't have to, you will never be working on the other side. And as you can see, I now have 2 rows of stockinette stitch. And again, the benefit of knitting in circular rounds is that you can make anything that requires like a tube-like structure. So that includes beanies, sleeves, let me see what else, cowls, and you can even knit amigurumi, like knit toys out of these circular rounds. So that is the difference between circular needles and straight needles. Essentially, circular needles can do everything that straight needles can do as well, but circular needles can also knit in continuous rounds and create these loops, like for hats and scarves. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.